Sean, we're back for episode number 2. What are we going to talk about today?
We're talking about Bob Dylan in the 80s, and we're going to go with 1981's Shot of Love. So, Shot of Love is something that I didn't buy until, years after it came out. But I do remember as a kid seeing the album cover in the record store, and what would be the word I would use as a kid? I'm thinking, I thought it was lame. I really did. I really did. But, looking at this album cover now, with my reading glasses, I've got the vinyl edition, and there's some aspects of it I really like. If you look at there's this old thing that they used to do with comic books. It was cheap printing. They couldn't do solid colors, so they do these dots.
Yes.
Yeah, so, and they're called Ben-Day dots. And so that's actually used on this record purposefully to kind of mimic that old comic book style.
It's that, but you know what it also reminds me of? You remember the coloring books?
Yeah.
The water, where you just spread the water all over the page and the colors come out? It reminds me of that.
Yeah, I remember the watercolors.
Yeah.
So, but before I get too much into the album cover, I wanted to show you the Neville Brothers. So Bob Dylan was a big Neville Brothers fan, and this album came out, maybe less than a year before Shot of Love. And so Bob Dylan sees this album cover and he likes it. It's got bold colors. It's playful. Got this alligator on fire, so it's kind of surreal. The album's called Fi-Yo on the Bayou by Neville Brothers. So Bob Dylan sees this album cover and says, you know what? I want this artist to do my next record, Shot of Love. And her name is Pearl Beach.
Yeah.
And so anyway, Pearl Beach was contacted by Bob Dylan and came up with this comic book concept. But hey, I've got more props to show you. But she liked this idea of, action with Shot of Love. And she was inspired by this American pop artist, and his name is Roy Lichtenstein. I think I pronounced that correctly. And so back in 1963, kind of around the same time as Andy Warhol, he was very inspired by advertisements and by comic books. And so he purposefully used that old printing style of the Ben-Day dots, and he came up with this thing called Wham! In 1963. So she took Wham! And kind of made it her own and came up with Shot of Love. So
this reminds me of the Batman 60s TV show where they have the fight scenes and you have the pow and the
absolutely,
and the bam.
Yeah, that's what she was doing. So looking at this album cover, now that I've got it on vinyl, I originally bought it on CD. Putting on my reading glasses, I noticed that it's pretty intricate. The colors are really great. There's neat geometric designs. She does something very artsy with these Ben-Day dots. But the one thing I don't like about the album cover, and I think it's why it turned me off on it, because I would say it's one of his worst album covers.
Yeah, I'd put it in that category.
But the one thing I don't like about it is you've got these Shot of Love letters, and they're white, and they almost look pasted on. Like she did the art, and then they just pasted letters. And I think if she would have went with like yellow letters that look like the comic book action letters that they used, hand drawn,
you're right.
I think it would have been better. And then I had this idea that she could have gone all out with this comic book thing. Do you remember you would buy these old comic books and they would have the comic book corners, and you would have like, let's say you're buying a Spider-Man comic, it'd have Spider-Man's head, and then underneath it would say the number of the issue.
Yes.
So I was thinking it'd be kind of cool to have like a cartoon Bob Dylan head.
Oh,
I think it was his 20th album.
Actually, that's
his
not
20th
bad.
studio album.
Yeah.
So you could have like the number 20.
Oh, true.
And then you have Shot of Love. She could have done more with it maybe.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good point. I know my impressions were, it's kind of cheesy, not serious.
Right.
The cartoony thing. I mean, Kiss was doing that with Unmasked, and
now I think that one works really well.
yeah, because it's
looks
legitimately
like
a comic book strip.
Thin Lizzy kind of did it a little bit with Boys Are Back, or Jailbreak.
Jailbreak. Yep.
Where it looks like a Marvel comic.
Well, and then more recently, but still a little ways ago, Wilco Schmilko album cover has that that green background with the comic book. Yeah, I mean, it's been done. I think Jethro Tull's got something like that. It's been done.
But yeah, I think that's probably why I didn't respond to the album cover. Plus, when you buy it on CD or cassette, it's kind of drowned out. But on the album, I mean, there is a lot to like about it. I think, when you compare it to Saved was very severe, is maybe a word I'd use. This one's more playful.
Yeah,
so that's why I do like that it's a playful cover.
You know, looking at it like you were just saying, the CD and the cassette really cheapened it, made it worse than it is.
Right,
You bring in the album. This might be the first time I've ever seen like the full album version of it, Sean. And it's actually more appealing to see it on a big album cover. And
I like that back photograph too.
I really like the back photograph. I'm not saying that should have been the cover, but I think that's a good picture of Dylan. You know?
Yeah. If you remember when we were looking at Saved, they had this kind of out of focus concert image.
Yes.
So this is much better.
Yeah, I agree. Anyways, before we get deeper into this record, and I know we kind of started off with the album cover, Sean, you brought some other albums, because this is the third album in the so-called Christian Trilogy, and we're going to kind of debunk, like, how heavy duty is this in regards to being part of a trilogy, right? Because you can even go into Infidels, and there's some references of Christianity and evangelical themes. This album is definitely transitioning into what Infidels will be, and then beyond that, right?
Right, yeah.
So you can even...
I think that's a great word. It is a transitional record.
It's very transitional. So, yeah, go ahead and lead us up to this record with the other two.
So I had this idea. I was thinking about these albums last night, and I thought, okay, so you got Slow Train coming, and it's like maybe you go to a church service and you get up and you give your testimony, you know, your proclamation. So I think this is Bob Dylan's proclamation.
Due to, like, just initially getting inspired, right?
Right.
Like, he's just now getting this realization, and this is the initial jolt.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. And then Saved is the celebration that happens after his testimony. So you've got, it's a revival meeting with music. People are dancing in the aisles, hands in the air, slain by the Spirit. And then I look at Shot of Love as, okay, the service is done, and you walk out of that church bubble, and now you've got to interact with the real world.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's a lot like kind of my journey through the faith, because there's always been an ebb and flow with me.
Sure.
And, some people get this born-again vibe, and they become completely different people. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Maybe it's actually the best thing. It wasn't me. I didn't all of a sudden become so Christian-oriented that I was pointing my finger at people and virtue signaling. I just never reached that point of it. At least at age 60, I'm still not there. But
I'm glad.
But at some point when you get the jolt and you realize, this is real, and you start to kind of follow the moral teachings. Now you've got this crossroads where do you take it? Do you go into this serious evangelical virtue signaling kind of path, which I said, I mean, maybe that is the right way to do it. It just isn't me. Or you go the path of practicality. How do you incorporate this into your secular life, right?
That's a great way to put it.
So, and I feel like that's what he did with the lyrically. I mean, he's even got a mixture of songs that maybe don't fit with the Christian theme. Lenny Bruce comes to mind, which we'll break down the tracks in a little bit. But I just feel like here now, the first two albums were, he got the Spirit in him, and then he's living the Spirit, and he's sharing what that's like to him. And now he's kind of going back into secular society with that Spirit still hanging around and moving forward with a new lens in life. So, yeah.
100%.
There we go.
That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, that's all I got to say about that, as Forrest would say. So,
I need a shot of love out of mine. Be still. In the time of my confession, in the hour of my deepest need.
All right, so Steve, when was the first time you interacted with Shot of Love?
okay. Well, I heard a couple tracks off Shot of Love, not knowing they were from Shot of Love, because as I mentioned in the Saved podcast, I bought Biograph. That was probably the third record I bought was Biograph, mid-'80s, 85 or so. I figured I had Highway 61, and I had I mentioned to you earlier. What were the two I had?
Empire Burlesque.
Empire Burlesque. So, and I was just going to start filling in the gaps, right, based on those two records. But the Biograph comes out, and I'm going, oh, this is like a compilation of everything up to Biograph, or up to Empire Burlesque. So I buy that, and I really listened to it. I loved it, and some of the versions on that ended up being better versions to me than the studio cuts on the records, because it's my first exposure of the song, and I grew to like them through that version of them. So I heard Every Grain of Sand on the Biograph compilation, and it's the studio version. Maybe it was remastered, I don't know, but I liked that song immediately. And years later, when I start to complete and fill in the gaps, the Christian Trilogy were some of the last albums I would incorporate into the collection. So I kind of reluctantly bought Shot of Love, because I didn't have a lot of money in those days, and spending my fun money on that and having to wait a month to buy a new record was kind of hard for me to swallow. But I got the album, brought it home, and I think I liked some of it, but I never really gave it a chance. And I already had Every Grain of Sand on Biograph. So that album kind of got put on the back burner for years. You, Sean, what was your experience with Shot of Love?
Well, I mentioned to you that a friend and I, shortly after high school graduation, 1986, we go see Bob Dylan. My first time seeing Bob Dylan. Great show, Tom Petty and Bob Dylan together, True Confessions. And he does Lenny Bruce's Dead. Of all the songs, he picks that one. And, in concert, it's hard to really listen intensely on lyrics. But I recognized it was about Lenny Bruce. And the thing I knew about Lenny Bruce is the Dustin Hoffman movie. I'd seen that recently. But didn't know a lot about Lenny Bruce, but thought, that's kind of cool. He's singing about this controversial comic. And then years later, I maybe had 6 or 7 Bob Dylan albums, but I went out and bought the Bootleg Sessions, volumes 1 through 3. It was on CD, right? Right behind us. It only came out on CD. And I heard Every Grain of Sand. Now, that version, we'll talk about a bit later, but it's just Bob Dylan on the piano. And at one point, you can hear a dog bark in the background. But it was very moving. And I think the nice thing about that version, you can lock in on the lyrics. And we'll talk about that a bit later. But
right.
And then Shot of Love, I bought probably early 90s when you and I were hanging out. And I was really drawn to music by mainstream artists that had spiritual content. So Van Morrison, U2, to a lesser degree, Midnight Oil. They were political, but they also were progressive Christians.
Did you put Stryper on the top of that list?
Did not do Stryper, did not do Amy Grant. And then another artist who was new at the time was Peter Himmelman, and I bring him up because he is the son-in-law to, guess who? Bob Dylan.
Did he marry one of his daughters?
He did.
Well, I guess that would make
Smart
sense.
man.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah,
But so I bought it knowing that it had these Christian themes to it. And the great thing about the Christian albums for Bob Dylan, I could walk into my local record store and they had a used section, and you always found those things in the used section. Yeah. And so, I picked it up for $6, and I wasn't disappointed. I remember reading a couple of reviews, like I think Rolling Stone gave it 2 stars. I wasn't expecting a lot, but I liked it from the get-go.
It's definitely an album that ended up in the leper bin probably sooner than it should have. But I mean, I read that it charted in the UK at number 6, which is a top 10.
The UK, they love, if you listen to a lot of the commentators, they love Street Legal, they love Saved, and they love this album. 3 albums that in America were...
Yeah, that was like the waning years at the time. I mean, Dylan has proved that wasn't him fading out. In fact, we're going to hopefully prove to you guys that this wasn't even close to the signal that he's running out of ideas, because he's got lots of new albums that will be coming out years later. But 33 charted 33 in the States, which still, I mean, a top 50 album with Christian themes.
I think that was his all-time lowest.
I
might be wrong.
At that point, for sure. And oddly enough, I don't know if this is like the power of suggestion Dylan trying to put out in the world, but this he thought was the best album he had ever made. And we're not talking about right after he recorded it and it was his current album and he's trying to put some propaganda behind it. He said that years later. He goes, I think it was the best album I ever made. So I read that quote. So, and then we're talking about discussing this album. I'm going, man, I don't know about that. Now, I still don't know about that, but the album is,
I disagree with Bob.
Yeah, I definitely disagree. But I still think it's a much better album than I gave it credit for, and this is all revisionist history, right? I kind of did the same thing with Saved. The album's definitely much better than the day I bought it. It sounds much better to me now. Got a different way of looking at life and things, and I understand what went into it. I also want to talk about, I know this was going to be kind of a short segment, but maybe it's okay to talk about this right now. You and I were texting each other the other day, and you kind of said, this is one of you think it's stronger album
Than Saved.
Saved, yeah. And then I kind of disagreed, but not like emphatically. I could see the argument. Now I'm kind of on your side. I think I do like it better than Saved after the last few days of re-listening to it, re-examining it. I initially texted you to say the production. It's thin, tinny, rushed, uninspired. I felt like the musicians were just kind of thrown in the room and nobody spent time with arrangements. So there was no catchy guitar hooks and things like that. Some of the harmonica playing is brilliant on side B. But other than that, I just thought the songs were kind of mundane and there was nothing hooky about them, at least initially. And that was my thought just 2 days ago. But, I went back to revisit the Heart of Mine version, the live version on Biograph. And it's got that My Girl down, 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 down. And there's the hook that was missing on the studio version. So the album definitely, he's, this whole thing in my head about, they just kind of rushed through this record. Really not so true, because as I dug deeper, it turns out he went to multiple students. There's multiple versions of these songs out there, different musicians helping him flesh out these songs. And he went with the songs he went with, which we'll get into the next segment about the track selection. But he really tried to find the right producer. He tried to find the right studio, get the right sound. This wasn't just hastily thrown together. So I was wrong about that. And with that, we'll start breaking down the tracks, I guess, huh?
Awesome.
All right.
Let's do it.
All right, got my Guinness. And we're ready for, what are we talking about now, Sean? What's the
Let's
next?
talk about the tracks.
Let's do the tracks.
So the first one is I Need a Shot of Love. Shot of Love is first up. And what do you think about that track?
Okay, you know what? Like I said earlier, 2 days ago, I would have said, I listened to it again just today, and I had my surround sound going, and I could hear the separation of the instruments. And, man, I think that song is a great way to open the album. It grabs you. It's upbeat. It's got a power, just like the album cover. It's got a power punch to it. Great song,
Well, it's kind of funny. I've been listening to this record for 2 weeks. I probably played it in the house, 3 or 4 times. And so it's become a catchphrase with my wife, Cindy. So she came home from work yesterday. We just got back from vacation. She looks at me and she says, I need a shot of love. But I think what I like about it, if you look at Saved starts out with the song Satisfied Mind. So the person that's singing this, Bob Dylan's kind of coming across a little bit like, hey, right now I've got my stuff together. But this one, he's admitting, you know what? I'm spiritually dry, call it spiritual dehydration. I need a shot. And it kind of reminds me, I remember a few years later, I bought this album in the early 90s, let's say 1999, 2000. Do you remember that album that came out, Summer Teeth by Wilco?
Oh, yeah. Love that album.
I remember hearing one of my favorite songs off the album is Shot in the Arm.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And the first thing I thought of was this song. I always do, I'll do that. I'll think of another song when listening to a song. And I think the lyrics are, baby, all I need is a shot in the arm.
Yes.
Something in my veins that's bloodier than blood. And I thought, they're coming from very different perspectives. Jeff Tweedy's a humanist. He he's talking probably about maybe anxiety, depression, his mind, whereas Bob Dylan's thinking of it more as a spiritual matter. But I like the fact that, again, I think Bob Dylan's grown in his Christianity. It's a more mature faith. And so he feels comfortable saying, you know what? Sometimes I feel dry. Sometimes I feel a little distant. Sometimes I need that shot.
And, man, that's actually a great outlook or viewpoint. Yeah, I'll go with that. The Shot of Love is a great opener, as I said, and it's a great way to kick off any album. And if you're popping the cassette in your car, it's rocking right out the gates. So, yeah, it's a good song.
I was looking at some stuff on Shot of Love, and I've read, you mentioned this earlier when we were talking off camera, that Bob Dylan considers this one of his best songs, or at least he did throughout the 80s. And I'm paraphrasing here, but there was an interview in 1984 where he says, if you want to know where I am, if you're interested in that, listen to Shot of Love. It's the most perfect song I've ever written. If you want to know where I'm coming from, romantically, he mentions, I think he says spiritually, musically, that is the song if you want to know where I'm coming from. And around the same year, U2, there's a place outside of Dublin called, I think it's Slane Castle. Mm-hmm. And so they're...
The Unforgettable Fire.
Yes.
You can see the cover of
yep.
The Unforgettable.
And so they're in the studio with Daniel Lanois. They're big Dylan fans. They hear that Bob Dylan's going to play a show there in Dublin. It's outside of Slane Castle. Mm-hmm. And so Bono is going to interview Bob Dylan. He does. And he sits down, and instead of mentioning, like most people, hey, I really liked Highway 61, I really liked Blonde on Blonde, Bono says, yeah, I love Shot of Love. And Bob Dylan was kind of surprised. He's like, you're one of the few people that has ever said that. And so they instantly had a great rapport because of that. And Bono was saying that he wanted Unforgettable Fire to have the same production feeling. He really liked the production of Shot of Love and thought that it felt very intimate, like you were in the studio with a band that wasn't overly produced, it wasn't overly polished. The first time I got the album, I agree with what you said to me earlier, that it did sound a bit tinny to me, but I didn't mind. It's probably the first album, unlike Saved, where you're thinking Bob Dylan is in the 1980s. It's something with the drums, I'm not sure. It sounds more early 1980s, but yeah, Bono was inspired by the album, and I think for several years said it was his favorite Bob Dylan album.
Yeah, that's definitely going to win Bob Dylan over, because Bob Dylan said the same thing, right? And that guy had some major iconic moments with his recording history, and to put that up in the top, I wouldn't do that.
No, I wouldn't. What was it reminds me of this interview with Dana Carvey. Dana Carvey was talking about how when he first became a member of the SNL cast, that Lorne Michaels invited him to his house over the weekend, and Lorne says, "Oh yeah, Paul's stopping by." He's like, Paul who? Oh, Paul McCartney. And Dana Carvey's a huge Beatles fan.
Oh, yeah.
But he did the smart thing like Bono did. When he met Paul McCartney, it was the early 80s, he said, I love the album Tug of War. And so Paul McCartney was instantly won over, where I'm sure Paul at the time probably got tired of talking about Abbey Road,
right?
Sgt. Pepper.
One of the Beatles getting back together.
If you ever meet a rock and roll legend, that might be a good trick.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I love Dungeon Lane.
Well, if I would have met Bob Dylan at the time he recorded his Christmas record,
You'd be in trouble.
Dude, that's the best album you ever put together. Yeah, I agree. Like I said, like you quoted me, it was thin and tinny. Here's the deal. When I first, when the CD was released, well, I didn't buy it when the CD first came out. It was a completist kind of part of my collection, probably late 90s when I bought it. They just took the master tapes and put it on a CD. And if you listen to the cassette version of it, the production in those formats, there was no separation of instruments. There was everything was just kind of flatlined. It was just a flat, no dynamic. And I think that's where I got lost. The production kind of ruined the record for me in those initial listenings. But with the new technology, and I know you're a purist getting the records, which, this is like a new version of the album, right? Obviously, this isn't from 1981.
Right, it's an 85.
So that's probably been remastered, my guess. But I was listening to it downstairs on my Sonos system, and I got the surround thing, and I can hear the kick drum and the bass just
sounded
finding
great
the
when you
groove.
played it for me.
And I'm like, oh, nah, this production, maybe it just needed to be remixed. For whatever reason, it sounds really good to me now, and it has an energy to it that I feel like wasn't in Saved, and it wasn't in the one before that, Slow Train Coming. It's funny. I before we started these podcasts, Slow Train Coming was it. That was the best one. I still like Gotta Serve Somebody in that era as my favorite Dylan song of those 3 albums. But man, now the album, it has that energy. It's live. You feel like you're in the studio, like you just mentioned. Like I felt like I'm sitting in my living room, and the drummer's over here, and Dylan's singing here, and there's a guitar player over here. The bass is grooving locked in with the drummer. I'm not gonna pan the production now. They fixed it, or I'm just 60 years old, and now it all of a sudden sounds good to me. I don't know. But yeah, so Shot of Love. All right, what's the next song?
By the way, the one thing I will mention is I do like the content of this record better because, again, you see him maturing with his faith. Where, some people might not admit, you know what, sometimes I feel distant. I feel far away from God. I need that shot of love. So that's what I like, and you hear those type of themes throughout the album. So it's not so much always the music for me that makes me like this album so much, some of the ideas, the messaging behind it.
No, and there is, he's also, with the Lenny Bruce track, which we'll get into, he's got some songs that aren't overtly Christian, if at all. And so you see that transition, and you see him now incorporating whatever he got from this movement in his heart and soul is now being put to practical use in his secular life, which is what, let's face it, most of us that are under that Christian umbrella, we're not evangelicals. We're not out preaching. We're not knocking on doors. We're not trying to tell everybody that they need to believe what we believe, but we do incorporate it in our own life, and we're still doing normal things. I'm still drinking a Guinness. I'm still going to concerts and smelling the ganja everywhere, right? Or is it ganja?
Ganja.
Ganja. So I think it's more powerful in that way. I think you're going to reach more listeners, although this album was, like we said earlier, not one of his top sellers.
No.
But I think in hindsight, people are revisiting it and realizing this is very digestible.
And I think Dylan fans at the time, I could be wrong because, again, it only went to 33, but Dylan fans at that time probably were relieved that he's, backing off from such overt messaging, such black and white messaging. But,
Which, ironically enough, though, it's like Rolling Stone and some of those other critics panned it worse than any album up to that point.
Probably, I think it was probably on track with Saved, where they were very lukewarm. Maybe not quite as severe, but they were lukewarm on this record too. But if I was a Dylan fan at the time, I would be relieved that there's more of Bob Dylan's personality coming out on this record,
especially with the harmonicas coming back.
Yeah,
It sounded like the era where he recorded "The Man in Me."
Yeah,
which I discovered from the Big Lebowski.
I did too. New Morning's a great record.
Yeah, it is.
But it's because of the Big Lebowski that I bought New Morning.
Yeah, revisit that, and I liked his voice in that era. Yeah, it was a good sound. So,
Heart of Mine? You want to do Heart of Mine?
Do Heart of Mine. Is that next?
Okay, I think so. All
right.
Let me double check. Yes, Heart of Mine.
Yeah.
So you did a great treat for me this morning when I got to your house. You played me that live track on your beautiful system from Biograph.
Yeah.
And you talked about it earlier, but man, I like the song as it is on the record.
Yeah, it's a good song.
Yeah, the live version is much better.
Yeah, what this song's got going for it is it's a melodic song. It's got a catchy, hooky melody to it. Good chorus. But yeah, if you get a chance to listen to the Biograph version of it, it's on the 3rd disc if you're listening to it on CD or on streaming. And it's, I don't know, it's like the 3rd song on it or something, but listen to that version and crank it because it gives you that gives you a shot of love. I mean, it's got a bouncy, fun, like I think I already mentioned this, that My Girl, down, 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 down. It's got that a little jazzier phrasing, right, but man, it was good. So I love Heart of Mine. Right now, I'm going to say that's probably my favorite track on the record.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm going out there. I'm going out on a limb.
There's a woman, and I forget her name, but she was the one that had the big hit, Midnight at the Oasis.
Yeah.
I forget her name,
Yeah.
but I noticed that she did a album of Bob Dylan love songs, and that was one of the songs. She did a nice version of it.
No.
So obviously, with that, this is a song that won't be completely forgotten. People are out there covering it, not in droves,
Right.
But I think it's an interesting love song because there's a lot of songs during this time and before where guys are singing about, hey, I don't want to fall in love. I want in and out, and they usually blame the woman. But in Heart of Mine, if you look at the lyrics, and again, I like this throughout the album, Bob Dylan's taking a hard look at himself.
Yeah, it really.
I've got,
mine is in the title, right?
Here's Heart of Mine, so malicious and so full of guile. So he's looking at himself in the mirror and saying, "You're a con artist." And then the other one, I found this funny. It comes at the end of the song. He says, "If you can't do the time, don't do the crime." Heart of
That's
Mine.
a good phrase.
So I like the fact that he's not putting the woman on trial. He's putting himself on trial.
And is he, that's a song that could be a secular love song, but it can also be attached to speaking of Jesus. So, like, where do you think it's more of a secular tune?
I think there's a religious aspect to it because I think as a Christian, Bob Dylan is doing an examination of conscience. As a Catholic thing that you're supposed to do before the sacrament of reconciliation.
I knew what you meant,
AKA
Sean.
confession. But yeah, I feel that this is a bit of a confessional one too. The thing with Bob Dylan, though, that in the song he's probably not going to take his own advice. But I do like this idea that, hey, she's not the problem, which is so typical in rock songs of especially the 70s, the 80s, the 60s. But no, he's taking a deep, hard look at himself.
Well, and if you replace "she's not the problem" to "he's not the problem," meaning Jesus, then it's that too. Like, people will blame Jesus when hard times come upon them.
Right.
They'll he's going through that divorce a few years earlier, and Blood on the Tracks is really him spilling his guts on that. And then he moves into that Christian phase. He's looking for some healing, it seems to me. And
he seems to be saying maybe a bit that some of these relationships, like his marriage that didn't work out, he was at fault. He was at blame. It's this Heart of Mine.
So that's that duality
can't be trusted.
that I'm hearing in the song. Like, you can go, it could be both, and this is where he's a brilliant lyricist. People are saying that he's losing it at this point in his career. I don't know, man. It's still poetic. The fact that you can kind of draw different meanings, and the fact that you and I can discuss it and either agree or disagree on different aspects of the meanings of where he's going, to me, that's brilliant. I love songs that you have to kind of, the riddles, you have to dissect them a little bit. Even though Heart of Mine sounds like it's
kind of a slight song, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's some depth to it for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see. Next up, we've got Property of Jesus.
I love this one too, man. I really like this song.
It sounds great on your system. So, Property of Jesus, reading a couple of reviews like Robert Christgau and some others, they lambasted this thing. I think they looked at it too specifically that, Bob Dylan and all Christians are being persecuted, even though they are by far the majority in America. I think they were looking at it the wrong way. For me, I look at it more as a universal thing that, it's hard to be the person that follows their conscience. So, I think about some people in pop culture. There's Fat Albert. You remember the Fat Albert cartoon?
Yeah.
Fat Albert was like,
Hey, Bamamba, I got to get a pajama.
he was the moral compass of the gang, if you remember. And he'd be like, "Hey, Rudy, that's not right." And they was, "Oh, Fat Albert, come on." So Fat Albert was he's the property of Jesus. Or, Charlie Brown. Let's stick with cartoons. Charlie Brown, he's got the runt Christmas tree. Yeah. And everyone thinks, "Oh, you're a dope, Charlie Brown." Yeah. Charlie Brown's wanting like a more simplified version of Christmas. And then at the end of that special, turns out that he's a bit redeemed.
Yes.
And then just in literature, you think of Tom Joad from Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah.
There's this one, you and I, when we first met, we were both into Kurt Vonnegut.
Yes.
And there's this Kurt Vonnegut novel that he wrote, and the idea behind the novel is he says, he was a cynical guy,
Right?
But there's truth in this. He said, you're all these things that you're taught at Sunday school, like the Beatitudes. Everybody thinks or everybody says, "Oh yeah, that guides my life." He says, but people don't live according to those rules. And he says, if they did, you'd think they were nuts. And so with this concept, he wrote, I think it's called "God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater."
Yeah,
I don't know if you ever read that one.
No, I didn't read that one, but I'm familiar with the
I got my notes. Did I get the title right?
Yeah.
God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater. And so Elliot Rosewater is a wealthy man who decides, you know what? I don't need to make any more money. I'm going to dedicate myself to helping those in need, ordinary people. And everybody around him is like, dude, you're nuts. And people are saying behind his back, has this guy lost his mind? So for me, I don't know if Rosewater, or Fat Albert, or Charlie Brown, or Tom Joad were hardcore Christians, but that's the theme I get from that song is that people who are trying to do the right thing, even when they're told it's dumb, it's naive, even if they might cost themselves, in difficult times, they're still wanting to follow their conscience. That's the message I get. Not he's talking about all the members of the Vineyard Church that are being persecuted. No, I see it more as a universal theme.
No, and knowing Bob Dylan lyrically throughout the years, that's where he's going with it. I totally agree with you.
And good old Chuck Plotkin is one of the producers. I think he worked on this song. And I might be reaching here, but it's got a little bit of a Springsteen vibe to me, kind of full, Phil Spector / via Springsteen, not as polished.
Well, I'm going to revisit it with that in mind and see if I'm getting that too.
So it's a song that I kind of like to crank. I listened to it on the way over here.
I love that song. I do. And I think part of the problem with the critics in that song, it's like nowadays, everything's about a headline. You read a headline and it sounds like something awful or it's ridiculing somebody. And then you read the rest of the print. If you get down into the story, you realize, well, that's a misleading title or article.
Yeah, like clickbait.
Yeah, it's a clickbait title. If you just look at Property of Jesus, the title of it, it sounds like it's going to be a virtue signaling, I'm the property of Jesus, and,
I'm a victim.
Or even that. Yeah. But you just dissected it beautifully by saying, well, it's a little more broad and universal, and he's not preaching. It's not preachy to me. Even though the song Property of Jesus sounds like it's going to be a total preachy song. Yeah, it's a good song. It's worth revisiting if you haven't ever heard it, or you've heard it 20, 30 years ago and didn't like it.
Hear it on a good system.
It's one of my top 5 songs on the album.
There's the line, I think it goes, I don't have it written down. He's the property of Jesus. You resent him to the bone. You've got something better. Here's where his wit comes in. You've got a heart of stone.
Yes, that's a
I love
great
that
line.
Oh, okay, you're saying that I'm being naive? Well, look at your option. Your option is to be a, I don't want to curse.
A jerk?
Yes, thank you.
Cynical jerk.
But that's what I like about this album too. Is I find it humorous, and you see that wit, that sense of humor, that jab. Well, that you didn't see in Saved.
Well, in the Heart of Stone, there's the biblical reference. So he's staying true to where he's at in life. But it's also, is it a dig at his critics? You go back to Blonde on Blonde, the opening track is that Rainy Day Woman song. They stone you when you try to be so good. I feel like he does a little bit of that on this record as a whole. Yeah.
I didn't think of that. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's talking about getting ridiculed for doing what he does, whether it's his records, his songs, or his faith. And he's resilient. He's, it's okay. This is who I am. This is what I'm doing. I'm okay with it. I'm not. Maybe he is a little thin-skinned behind the recording, but.
And sometimes I like to think of these songs as he's talking to himself too. He's like, next time somebody pulls you inside and says, Bob, that's not the right thing to do. That instead of cutting that person's head off, maybe he could listen and calm down and take it to his heart. Because I like to think of these songs as him also giving himself a pep talk. Hey, next time somebody pulls you aside and says you're going the wrong direction, maybe you should listen to them instead of attacking them.
Well, and here's more evidence to show that Dylan Yeah, he transitions. He has different phases of his career, and his recordings. Every couple albums, he kind of seems to change drastically and upset one group of fans and create a new batch of fans. That movie, Complete Unknown. Look, how many of his circle said, "Do not go electric. Do not get on that stage and plug in guitars." And he did it anyways. In the moment, it upset everybody. But look at us now in the year 2026. That's the best thing he could have. I mean, if he didn't go electric, I don't know if I'd still be talking about Bob Dylan. It's all good. It's all good. His whole journey it's a big, giant story that's, if you just listen to the whole thing, it's a good one. What's next?
All right. Yeah, we're on a roll. Let's keep going. Okay. This is a song that I've heard some commentary. People hate. There's only one guy, a guy that comes out of UK, John Heaton, is the only person I've ever heard that likes this song, and it is Lenny Bruce is Dead. Now, I was going to send this to you, I didn't, but there's a kind of a left of center comedian, Tim Heidecker, that works out of LA, and he does a funny bit on this Lenny Bruce song, and basically the idea behind it is, hey, I know the hits of Bob Dylan, and he's supposed to be the greatest lyricist in rock and roll history, so I want to dive deep using my Apple Music account. And then I stumbled upon Lenny Bruce. Then he gets behind the piano and and sings the song. And it is funny. Even though I am a fan of the song, actually.
He kind of pokes fun at it.
He pokes fun at it big time. It's a funny bit.
Well, and it's funny, the critics that say, "Oh, he just went too Christian and this is not for my ears," they rip on Lenny Bruce for not being Christian and connecting with the rest of the record, making their case that the record's discombobulated, disjointed. There's no direction. Bob Dylan's just throwing everything and seeing what sticks. Yeah. It wasn't that, And I think Bob Dylan had a relationship with Lenny Bruce. Didn't he?
He did. Him? There's a story that they shared a cab there in New York City. He was in the cab with Lenny Bruce for 10 minutes. And he says, yeah, being in the cab with Lenny Bruce for 10 minutes, it's like knowing him for a month. And I'm not sure if that's a compliment, but he meant I know. He meant it as a compliment.
I think he did. I think he just meant I really got to know the guy.
Right.
In just 10 minutes.
But, that's something I can imagine a 9-year-old kid saying when they're going to grandma's house. Gee, an hour with grandma's like a month. But no, he meant it as a compliment. But, here's what I love about this is, that Bob Dylan is not completely encased in this Christian Vineyard Church bubble. Because Lenny Bruce, if you look at his material, he could be considered blasphemous. He could be considered somebody that would offend churchgoers. And Bob Dylan saying, you know what? I still admire him because he spoke truth to power. He had a huge amount of courage. He was jailed for obscenity.
Yes.
And but again, it's an obscene comic. But Bob Dylan is lifting him up. Now, I will say this, when I knew about this song, when I bought the CD and I'm listening to it, I was disappointed by the lyrics.
Yeah.
There's some funny ones. Like he's got this thing, he didn't win a Golden Globe. And, Golden Globe's like a poor man's Oscars. And then he says he didn't go to Synanon.
Yeah.
You know what Synanon is?
I don't even know. So I'm like, what does that mean? Yeah.
I had to look it up. But I guess maybe it was a Los Angeles thing and some celebrities went there. But it was a drug rehab program that kind of evolved into a cult. But I think it was, maybe some high names went there. So it's like, yeah, he didn't go to this drug retreat center. Then there's another one that's kind of funny where Bob Dylan says, I don't have it written down, but he didn't burn down any churches. He didn't cut off any babies' heads.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you're listening to these lyrics, and you're maybe a little bit disappointed, but I think Bob Dylan maybe purposefully didn't spend a lot of time on the song, said some things that were kind of
like a stream of conscious.
Yeah.
It didn't edit it.
Well, it's like if you ever go to a funeral and people get up, some people have things, they write a speech and they've got it down. And then you've got other people and they don't really know what they're about to say and they speak from the heart.
Yeah.
And some of it is maybe some of it's a little bit, off base. And that's kind of the way I imagine it, because Bob Dylan has a warm performance on this. The piano's It's very
Yeah,
warm,
I know,
very
and
intimate.
it's
It's
a-
heartfelt.
And it's a good melody. Once it kind of kicks
Yeah.
in, it's a good melody.
And so I think of the guy that hasn't planned everything out in his head, and he wants to get up and say some words about his dearly departed friend. And
I think you nailed it. Honestly, we won't know for sure unless we had Bob
Right.
Dylan sitting with us. But
he liked it obviously because he was performing it in 1986.
yeah,
when I
you saw
him,
it. Yeah, and yeah, I know.
And Tom Petty liked it.
Well, and the thing is, there's a lot of phrases don't even rhyme, so it's almost like it's just a rant.
He's the brother that you never had.
Yeah.
But I think I like more the idea behind the song than the actual song.
Yeah.
Because again, it's like, he's not living in this church bubble. Because Lenny Bruce was not speaking out on the behalf of Christians, for sure. He was obscene.
Yeah, exactly.
He was blasphemous.
And he's a guy that transitioned to the comedy format. So I don't know. Maybe that's another channeling too. Dylan's always transitioning into what's next. Dylan could have just stayed an acoustic guitar folk singer,
True.
and kept those fans happy forever. But Dylan was like, I need something new. I need a new challenge. And I don't know. To me, Lenny Bruce challenged the whole comedic.
Oh, yeah.
And I know he kind of got so cynical where it wasn't funny anymore. He was
Right, you were
George
talking-
Carlin kind of did the same thing to me. Like, I'm a big George Carlin fan, but towards the end, he was more ranting things he hated than just being funny. Still, some of it was funny.
I think Lenny Bruce, towards the end, he would get in front of an audience and he'd have court papers and he would read the court papers.
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah.
Because he did time for obscene language.
Yeah, I mean, it wrecked his life. The trouble he got himself into, which only fueled him to push the envelope and get himself into more trouble. And Dylan's done that. Dylan gets in
Right,
trouble
so-
with the critics and the fans.
They're brethren for sure.
Yeah.
And, the one thing I also like about it is Bob Dylan isn't remembering Lenny Bruce by Lenny Bruce's vices. It's more, his positive attributes. And he did. He was courageous.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, next song. Here's another song that a lot of Dylan fans online seem to hate. I like it. Watered Down Love.
I know. Dude. I grew to like it. I do like it now, and I think it's a catchy.
It is
I'm
catchy.
big on melodies,
There's an
man.
earworm that hits
Yeah,
about
there
just a
is.
few, maybe 10, 20 seconds into the song.
Yeah. Did you have something
I'm
more,
kinda-
more profound to add to that one? I do like the song.
Oh.
It's melodic enough for me it's catchy enough.
Actually, don't. But here's the thing. Watered Down Love. Again, when I'm listening to a song, I'm reminded of other songs.
Mm-hmm.
And so the big song when I was in high school, it was the slow dance song at the dances. It was I Want to Know What Love Is by Foreigner.
Yeah, that's
So you imagine Lou Gramm. I want to know what love is, and I could see Bob Dylan if he was kind of grumpy. He said, "Lou, you want watered down love. If you really want to know what love is, open up to 1 Corinthians." But I think I like the song. This idea that you say you want love, but do you really? Because you might just be thinking of pleasure, companionship. Yeah, lust. Like you want a companionship without commitment, right? You want love without sacrifice. But if your real love is
rooted in
patience, kindness,
in
sacrifice,
that moral code of Christianity.
He's calling, and I think he's probably even calling. I like to think that Bob's also talking to himself, calling out himself. Yeah, the type of friendships and romances that you want are pleasure filled. It's not real true love. Again, commitment and sacrifice. But it's a catchy tune, and
it is.
It's probably a bit slight, but I wouldn't kick it off of this album.
No.
All right, next
Is
up.
that side A? Or?
That is side 1, and side 2. We get into something kind of controversial. Now, this is a later pressing. I think 1985.
Yeah.
But the original album that came out did not have this as the starter, and we're talking about the groom still waiting at the altar. And I can't imagine this album or side 2 without it. I bought it first on CD. It was there. The cassette, when it was released in 1981, also had that song, "Groom Still Waiting at the Altar." But yeah, if you bought the album, you were out of luck.
And was there something like he had. We're gonna talk about like the tracks that were left off that album, which including that one, which was like you said added much later. I noticed on Slow Train Coming, there's 9 tracks. Saved is 9 tracks. And leaving that off of this album is 9 tracks. Was there some kind of symmetry thing that he was?
There might be.
So maybe he said, it's got to be 9 songs.
It's like the number of the beast flipped.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I was going with it. Yeah,
because this easily fits on a vinyl album. Mm-hmm. Like I said, it's the copy that I have, and I decided to include it. A lot of people have ranted over the songs that are left off, but this has been part of the album since 1985. That's 41 years. So
I mean, it was not on it for 4 years, right?
Right.
So it's been on it obviously longer for most of the album's existence.
But you were the first time I ever heard this song, I thought immediately, oh wow, this is like an 80s version of the type of song you would hear on Highway 61 Revisited or Blonde on Blonde. You know what I mean by that? It's got this kind of bluesy.
Oh, totally.
All that's missing is the whistle.
Yeah, no, it totally had. No,
right.
Oh my gosh, I thought the same exact thing. When you, the first track of Highway 61, it's got the whistle and it's got that shuffle.
Right.
And this totally would fit on Blonde for that reason. Yeah.
Now this is a song. I mean, there's a lot of wild images, and
or not Blonde on Blonde, Highway 61. Sorry, let that go without me correcting myself. Go ahead. Sorry.
The song is like a rapid fire collage of all these different images. Some are biblical, some kind of relate to what's going on at the time, and I think if my Catholic school memory serves me correctly, this idea of the groom still waiting at the altar. The groom is Jesus.
Yes.
The bride is humanity. So,
well, and that's a Catholic thing.
So yeah, it is.
I mean,
and
the church is the bride, right?
Right, and so it's kind of this idea that God is still waiting on humanity. He hasn't abandoned us. He hasn't left us. He's still waiting, but humanity has yet to respond. So there's like this rapid fire images, and for me, sometimes with Bob Dylan, I don't really want to necessarily unlock the mystery. I don't think you can. Sometimes I just like to kind of bathe in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let the kind of images wash over you. But I wrote a few things down that kind of stuck out.
Pray tell.
This one, prayed in the ghetto with my face in the cement. That's the first line. Heard the last moan of a boxer, seen the massacre of the innocent. So again, it starts out hard. And then he continues, cities on fire, phones out of order. They're killing nuns and soldiers. There's fighting on the border. And I thought, you know what? In 1981, huge news story. I remember as a kid, I was probably 11 or 12 when this happened. You had all the stuff going on in Central America. And you had, I don't know if you remember this, these nuns, American nuns, who were serving a mission in El Salvador, and they were murdered.
Yes.
And they were murdered by members of the, I guess, National Guard of El Salvador. And the thing that made it shocking is, well, America was funding that. And I think Jimmy Carter was towards the end of his presidency, and he stopped, his administration stopped funding for a while, and they investigated it. And I think the claim was possibly that these soldiers were rogue, but I think later evidence shows, no, they were given those commands. And that was just a shocking thing.
Yeah.
And then later on with the Reagan administration, it was a controversial thing with some that they continued. Again, it was Cold War, fight against the spread of communism in Latin America. And so the Reagan administration upped the funding for, the Salvadorian National Guard.
Yeah.
But there's a little piece of this where I thought, oh, this is like the Dylan going back to the times they are changing, where he writes songs with headlines, but here it's just rapid fire. He doesn't spend a lot of time, and he's painting this picture of kind of a world on fire. I think there's a lyric, "The stage is on fire," and so it's again, I see him, with this great imagination coming back that was absent on Saved, and it's something that you would see again on Highway 61 on Blonde, and that's why I think I have a warm place in my heart for this record. And there's another piece that I wanted to mention on this. I don't know where the heck this woman comes, but all of a sudden there's this woman Claudette that pops up, and here's the line. I remember I I picked up on this line the first time I heard the song and made me chuckle. He says, "What can I say about Claudette? Ain't seen her since January. She could be respectfully married or running a whorehouse in Buenos Aires." And it's like, you kind of imagine a guy who's, bitter about an old lover. And he's like, he's at the bar drinking with his friends. I don't know what became of her. She could be married with 2 kids, American dream, or she could be running a whorehouse. I don't know which one. I don't really care. So I don't know what.
Yeah, what's your take on that? Like, it's a random thought with this other theme kind of permeating throughout the song.
Well, I was thinking that maybe Bob Dylan, he's talking about things on a global perspective. And he's like, the world's on fire, even my own personal life. And there's this,
okay.
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but that's what I like about Bob Dylan.
It's not such of a reach.
You don't have to figure it out.
Yeah.
But I love that line. I mean, talk about 2 extremes.
When Dylan was getting interviewed by Scorsese for that documentary that came out, it's old now. God, time flies so fast. But it's that
No Direction Home.
No Direction Home. It seems Scorsese's trying to get him to say, like, what inspired you? Like, how did you come up with these lyrics? And you were just like volumes and volumes of lyrics and meaningful stuff. And some of it people had to, just undo the riddle.
And sometimes I think you can't.
No, exactly. Well, and Dylan responded, he kind of shrugged off, like, I wasn't some deep thinker. It was a time in my life
Stream
where...
of consciousness.
Yeah, it was just, this stuff was coming to me. He doesn't have an explanation for it. So that could be a simple explanation for that. Like, hey, man, this is the song his energy's focused on. And then as he's writing the last few phrases, it's like, oh, Claudette just came to mind.
But I think it makes the song better.
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
Well, it makes you go, whoa, what? Like if you were drifting off. So, yeah, good. What's next?
What's next? Let's see. We've got... Oh, this is another one. I keep saying this for every song. This is another one that fans seem not to like. But I like this song. It's Dead Man, Dead Man.
Now, I like it now, but like it is a border. Don't love it. I don't, you know what? That song is my least favorite track. I would have liked to have seen that one left off and replaced with something that we'll talk about later. But if you're going to get rid of a song and replace it, Dead Man is the one that I would, but it is better than, God, I'm telling you, if we did this podcast Tuesday, I would have ripped this song. But I like it better now, and the reggae kind of vibe.
Well, now here's the thing. I am a sucker for reggae. I love reggae.
Okay, yeah.
And I've seen this multiple places where people will say, and I think it's ridiculous, they say, oh, this white reggae. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? White reggae? The Police.
Yeah.
The Clash.
Oh, true, yeah.
The Beat, they're mixed. They're what I think they used to call a twin tone band, but the lead singer, the main songwriter, is white.
UB40.
Yes, UB40. It's a mixed band, but the front man is white.
Yeah.
Joe Jackson, some of his stuff, Elvis Costello. Paul McCartney, he turned me on to, what was that cover song that he does? Love is Strange.
Yeah, is that reggae? It is reggae.
It's kind of reggae.
Yeah.
Eric Clapton. So I am a big fan of white reggae, and you're talking to a guy who got into reggae pretty deep. Bob Marley, I love him, but we're talking bands like Burning Spear. Have you ever heard Burning Spear?
I know, I'm not.
They are rough, and so it's like very authentic reggae.
Yeah.
So, but I'm all for white reggae. I'm a sucker for it. And what I like about the music for me, I have a picture in my mind that Bob Dylan is walking through like the gritty streets of early 80s New York, where the subway cars were just covered with graffiti. So I kind of imagine him and noticing this kind of deadness all around, and maybe some deadness within himself. And there's some clever lines that I just happened to write down.
Oh, well, let's hear these clever lines.
I thought this was cool. Cobwebs in your mind,
yeah.
Dust upon your eyes. So again, kind of you're mentally checked out and you're spiritually blind. Then this one is kind of interesting. The ghetto that you build for me is the one you end up in. Yeah,
that's very biblical. That's very Jesus' teachings. The part about the being blind,
right?
In fact, just today, I was listening to on Hallow, the gospel was alluding to one of the apostles is like, why do you speak to us in parables? And the response was, those who hear don't listen, and it was more to it than that. I'm bad about memorizing all these things, but it came to me today, and you're bringing that up. He's really referencing the biblical observations of Jesus saying, look, the people that are going to hear my message are going to understand my message, that are listening, that are really opening their heart, the heart of stone thing that comes back to mind. You got to get rid of that stone and soften some things up a little bit, and you'll see what I'm saying. You'll hear what I'm saying, and hopefully you'll follow what I'm saying, because if your heart's in it, you will. So to me, that's a Christian sentiment that he's pushing into that Dead Man song.
It's a nice insult if you have a bad day and you're a teacher. Hey, kid, you got cobwebs on your mind. I will not do that, I promise. Here's one that I think applies to today. The race of the engine that overrules your heart. The race of the engine that overrules your heart. So I was thinking, like technology, the fast-paced world, our gadgets, all those things, and it can even be ambition, but I looked at more of the technological aspect that, it dominates you. You've kind of lost yourself in it. And then I got one more.
Yeah.
The tuxedo that you're wearing, the flower in your lapel. So kind of this idea where evil can look very sophisticated, can be, kind of a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah, and he references that in another song, in Infidels, Man of Peace. Sometimes the devil comes to you.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Sometimes Satan comes as a man of peace. Yeah. So I have a soft spot for Dead Man. I think what I was missing on Saved is that grittiness. So, again, I see Bob Dylan back when New York City was tough, when Times Square was not a magnet for tourists, and he's walking through those streets. Yeah. He's riding those graffiti-covered subways, and I miss that grittiness. I think you had a little bit of it on Slow Train Coming, like I'm going to change my way of thinking, where you had kind of like a gritty, but you didn't have any of that on Saved. So, I'm probably being overly nice. I already told you I'm guilty of inflated grading, but I do like Dead Man, but most people don't.
Well, you have a strong argument lyrically. Like, I think his lyrics are really strong in that, and the fact that we can actually have a 5-6 minute conversation dissecting on some of the things you just said. So, I mean, lyrics that kind of make you think, to me, that's a win.
All right, next up we've got, this song is a song that I love. It's one of my favorites on the record. In the Summertime.
Oh, gosh,
man.
You know what?
I love that song.
That's a good argument to Heart of Mine. Like Heart of Mine and In the Summertime. Dude, on any given day, I'll take either one of those songs as my favorite on the album. In the Summertime is a great song. Yeah.
What's interesting about it is it comes off just like a very laid back hammock song. Like if I was doing a playlist, let's say, you and I, we live in Phoenix and we tube down the Salt River. And if I was making a playlist, I'd probably put that because it just has that lazy river feeling to it. But when you look at the lyrics, it's kind of intense. At first I thought it was slight, but I've always liked that song. Great harmonica. You were talking about how the harmonica is.
Yeah. Oh, that's where the harmonica really shines. That and later on.
It's kind of it's gentle. It's very breezy. That's
yeah.
But here's a couple of lyrics that really stuck out to me. I was in your presence an hour or so. Or was it a day? I truly don't know. And so for me, he's remembering back. It's nostalgia a bit. Oh, remember the time when we were so close. And he could be talking about a woman. He could be talking about a friend. He could be talking about God.
Yes.
And then it goes on at the end, because at first you're thinking, oh, it's kind of a sad, nostalgic tune. But then he says, and I'm still carrying the gift that you gave. It's part of me now. It's been cherished and saved. It'll be with me unto the grave and then unto eternity. So you're thinking it's kind of a slight song, but it's heavy if you ask me.
No, it is.
And so
and the melody. I know I keep going back to melody, and that sounds a little superficial, but man, if you can package it in a pretty melody like that, you're going to win me over.
Yeah, and so for me, I think it's maybe faith based where, hey, there was a time, let's say, Slow Train Coming, where, man, I was just so on fire.
Yeah.
And I don't have that same feeling necessarily, but, what I took away from that time, I've cherished, I keep, and it lives on in me today. So it's not like a sad, Don Henley, Boys of Summer. That is a depressing tune, right? Those days are gone forever.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what this song is saying. It's like,
Yeah.
those days have passed, but they're not gone. They still live in me.
Yeah, I agree. Total 100%.
And I tell you what, man, it is, again, a barbecue track. Nobody would think it is that heavy because it's such a sweet song. But I would say that it's right up there for me. It's in that top. I think there's 3 songs that are really top notch. Groom, that one in the summertime, and one that we'll be talking about pretty soon.
Yeah.
Okay, next up we've got my least favorite song on the track,
Okay.
or on the album, Trouble. 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 Nothing but trouble.
Yeah. I do like the opening kind of guitar playing. It's got a good bluesy, gritty. It's a good
That's what
bluesy tune.
I was going to say.
In that sense.
A bad Bob Dylan song for me is still a good song. So
Yeah.
I think the first time I heard the song, I thought, oh, this is kind of like a throwaway blues rocker.
Yeah.
But when you crank it, like I was in my car driving over here, it's a 35-minute drive, and I had it cranked, and I was getting into it. But it's still my least favorite.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's on there with. Maybe, I like Dead Man slightly more. Again, they're good songs. I know
I forgot about Trouble. Maybe that does pass up Dead Man as far as the bottom of the list. But I do like the bluesy instrumentation.
I get that, yeah. And I wrote down some lyrics from that, too.
Yeah, there's actually some strong lyrical content in that song.
So this is part of a lyric that I just jotted down. Packaging of the soul. So when I think of packaging of the soul, I think of the mega churches maybe, or televangelists. Televangelists, that was a big thing back then.
Well,
the prosperity gospel.
Jimmy Swaggart and Baker, they were all in these scandals at the time.
Or even this idea that advertisements that you can find your personality through a product.
Oh, there's that too. Yeah, that's another.
And then one other line I pulled is, I like this one a lot. Nightclubs of the brokenhearted, stadiums of the damned. And so for me, I think
lyrically, it's a strong song.
He's kind of poking at his world, right? Nightclubs, stadiums, stadiums of the damned. That could be the new name for Cardinal Stadium this year because things aren't looking good. Maybe I'm wrong.
Arizona reference.
Thank you. But this idea that people are looking for some kind of connection. Maybe they're looking in the wrong places. I'm part of this group when I see, Bob Dylan. Well, maybe you're still spiritually empty. I'm not quite sure what he's saying there, but I think it's, the pleasure-seeking piece that you're going to find happiness through pleasure. But, yeah, I think that's a great line.
There's something else going on in that song, too. I want to point out Trouble.
It's in the city. It's on the farm.
Yeah. Well, a recent gospel reading, just less than a week ago, was talking about the farmer. There's a parable about the farmer scattering seeds, right? And he goes to bed and he wakes up the next morning and a bunch of weeds have grown up with the good seed. And so the initial reaction is we got to pull up all those weeds. But the message is, no, leave the weeds in the garden and let the stuff you planted grow with the weeds. Okay? Weeds are the trouble. Okay? And the good seeds are the good people that are chosen, that are going to be lifted through the gospel, the word of the gospel. And so the message was, let God pull the weeds when it's time to pull the weeds. Because the weeds are going to affect the good seed and shape who you become, what the plant becomes. If you let the weeds overtake you, not that God tests us, but if you think about the trouble, the hardships that you've had in your life, in the moment you're like, why is God forsaken me? Why am I having to live through this? What's the lesson here? You don't always see it that clearly, especially when your emotions are high. I've definitely had some dark moments in my life. And now, today, sitting with you, talking about Bob Dylan records, a lot of those things pushed me in certain directions, caused me to leave one job and pick up a new job that shaped the next phase of my life. Eventually, I meet my wife, because there's trouble in my life that keeps forcing my decision making. And I really think that he's kind of hitting some of that in this song "Trouble" as well.
I do too, yeah.
Yeah, so there's my
if
deep take.
If that's the worst song on the album, that's a good. That's the thing, and maybe I'm prejudiced, but I think a bad Bob Dylan album, a bad Bob Dylan song, is still good.
Yeah, you're right.
That's how high he operates.
Yeah. All right, Sean. This brings us to the last track, "Every Grain of Sand," which is, by all accounts, the critics love this song. They might have panned the whole rest of the record, but this is considered the masterpiece on the record.
It's considered a classic. Probably, I would agree, actually, when you look at the lyrical content, I think it's his best of the Christian Trilogy. But it's kind of interesting. I learned a lot of things through rock and roll. So both Patti Smith and Bob Dylan, fans of both, and they talked about this poet, and so did Van Morrison, William Blake.
Yeah.
So they talk about William Blake, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to look up who is this William Blake, and I think he was maybe late 1700s.
Okay.
He was a kind of a Christian mystic who was a poet and an artist as well. And he, even though he was devoutly Christian, he did not like organized religion. So he kind of went off on his own thing. But he, I think, like Bob Dylan, he used a rich imagination with that Christianity. And so he had this famous line, "To see a world in every grain of sand." And so supposedly Bob Dylan picked up on that, but he kind of made it his own. And then he pulled from the gospel, I think it's the Gospel of Mark. You've got, every hair is numbered.
Yeah. Oh, and is it Matthew?
Maybe it's Matthew.
I think it's Matthew.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other one is every sparrow falls, and the idea is that God's aware of everything.
Yeah.
The smallest form of life, he's there, he's aware. And so I thought it was very clever that Dylan takes this William Blake piece and mixes it with these images from the gospel and makes it his own. And again, I don't think he was doing that with Saved. He wasn't doing that with Slow Train Coming. But I hear it as he's not preaching. It's I see him in prayer, and part of the prayer is confessional.
Yes. Yeah.
And
yeah, good point.
I got a couple of quotes here. So we've got, again, every hair is numbered, every sparrow falling, like every grain of sand. But the confessional part, the real personal part, pops up in lyrics like this: "The flowers of indulgence and the weeds of yesteryear." So, this idea of, the flowers being sin, and the weeds, these flowers turn into weeds, and the weeds, kind of choke your conscience. And again, he's talking about himself. And then there's another one: "I gaze into the doorway of temptation's angry flame, and every time I pass that, I always hear my name." So it's like, he's admitting that, temptation is still a pull, and that he has, maybe in Saved, you almost got the sense that, he was beyond temptation at times, the satisfied mind. But here he's saying, hey, it's a struggle. Every day is a struggle for me. And so I like that. And, he ends on a real positive note. This is mysterious. I haven't really wrapped my head around what this means, but I love this. It's towards the end of the song, I believe. "I hear the ancient footsteps, like the motion of the sea. Sometimes I turn and there's someone there, and sometimes it's only me." So maybe he's talking about God there.
Yeah.
That feeling that you have sometimes, I feel like I'm being watched. And then maybe you turn around and there's nobody there. But I like the fact that it is ambiguous. There is some mystery there. It's the Dylan of old.
It is. Yeah, I think you nailed the quotes from the song there, the lyrics. it's, and again, I'm going to go back to melody. It's a beautiful song,
it really
you know.
is.
If I were to critique the song, it's a little bit monotonous, kind of repetitious, the melody. There's no chorus. It
But
just
maybe
kinda,
it's more kind of like a prayer.
yeah,
A prayer's a
it
bit
is.
like that.
Yep. A
You know,
psalm.
And behind me, I've got this bootleg session, and that's the first time, as I mentioned earlier, that I heard the song. And I do prefer that version, probably because it was the first one I heard, and I played it multiple
Yeah.
times. So it'd be probably 4 or 5 years before I heard the version on Saved
Or
or
on
on
Shot-
Shot of Love. What I like about it is the intimacy. It's just he and the piano. It's almost like he's discovering the song while he's playing it. It just sounds really from the heart. And I'm a sucker for dogs, and you do hear that dog barking, a couple minutes into the song. So when I heard that version, I thought, the production at first, I thought it cheapened it a little bit. Maybe you were talking about how your initial response was the tinny production. You kind of hear the guitar. But now I've grown to love that version as well.
Right. Yeah, and my first time hearing that song, and it's the first track I've ever heard from Shot of Love, not even knowing it's part of Shot of Love, was on the Biograph album. And it was a strong tune on the Biograph album. When you're thinking it's spanning his entire career, outtakes, live recordings, demos, bootleg versions. And here is this song out of this treasure of Dylan music. And that's one of the standouts on Biograph. And we're talking, 50 songs on that record? Yeah, it's a great song. And I think it's definitely lyrically the strongest song on the album.
And he shows his growth as a Christian.
Yeah, because now he's writing like he writes.
Right, yeah.
And,
With imagination.
Yeah, exactly. And incorporating that part of him now. So, which is what he did so effortlessly in his early years. He just was able to just give you this poetry and then put some melody to it, some instrumentation to it, and come up with these brilliant songs. And this is definitely, it stands up to anything else great that he's done.
The funny thing is, though, when he talks about songs, he doesn't mention that one. He mentions "Shot of Love" as being like the best song he's ever written.
I think that's just Dylan being Dylan.
Yeah.
Like okay, everybody likes that one. That's the low hanging fruit. I'm gonna be the contrarian, like we like to be sometimes.
The one thing I think it's a beautiful way to end the album. But the one thing that this is not an original thing to say at all. A lot of commentators have said it already, but it's mind-boggling, some of the songs that he chose to leave off of this record. And I've got a couple of things behind me. I've got this volume, Springtime in New York. It's 1980 to 1985. And then, of course, the songs on Bootleg. And you wonder, why did he do this? And, of course, Caribbean Wind was on Biograph. Why did he decide to leave these songs off? And, Bob Dylan is Bob Dylan. He's not easily swayed. He sounds like he's a pretty stubborn guy. It's funny. Let's take a look at Springsteen. If you look at Springsteen, he's come out with several volumes of unreleased tracks. So you'll listen to these tracks, and they're good, but you're thinking to yourself, oh, I understand why this didn't make the cut for Darkness.
Yeah.
I understand why this didn't make the cut for,
Born in the USA.
Born in the USA. So Springsteen, maybe he listens to other people. Maybe he's more in tune with his art. Bob Dylan seems kind of like, not always his best own critic. There's one person I read somewhere, I don't know, maybe it was old Chuck Plotkin, who knows who it was, but somebody said, I worked with Bob Dylan on, this individual was mentioning both Shot of Love and Infidels. He said, you just got used to it. You would be part of the whole recording sessions for these records, and you just knew some of the best songs that Bob Dylan laid down would not wind up on the album. And so, Caribbean Wind, in my mind, the first time I heard that Biograph, and I was just blown away, and I got really excited about the track, and I thought, you know what? I want to find the album that's on, and I'm going to buy it. And I thought, it sounds 80s to me. It's a little yacht rocky, but in a good way. And I'm looking at Shot of Love. It's not on Shot of Love. I already had Infidels. And I was very disappointed when I found out, no, the only way you're going to get that song is if you lay out what seemed like a lot of money at the time, $30 for, Biograph. But I think that would have been a great opening for this album. And it kind of has I think it has a lot lyrically in common with, The Groom. You just have a bunch of different images. I wrote a couple of things down for Caribbean Wind. It starts out, she was the Rose of Sharon from Paradise Lost. And so it's like, what's he talking about? I remember the first time hearing it. So great thing about Bob Dylan, if you're a young person with maybe a limited education, you want to search this thing out. So, the Rose of Sharon is from the Song of Solomon, and it's supposed to be the biblical ideal of beauty. And then Paradise Lost, that's John Milton, and it's written about, I think, the fall of Lucifer and the fall of Adam and Eve. So he's saying, hey, she's the biblical ideal, but she's also Paradise Lost. So she's, in some ways, the biblical ideal of beauty, but she's like fallen Eve at the same time, which I think means she's human.
Yeah.
But again, what an imagination. And then the other thing that I thought, there's so many images I didn't want to bore you. I just wrote down two. Something that really holds true, rings true for our country today. I saw a house in the country being torn from within. I saw a house in the country being torn from within. And he could be talking about, family life, but he could be talking about, the country, the world. And so the funny thing is, you have all these different lyrics that turn out to be very timeless.
Yes. Yeah, you can attach them to any era, right?
But yeah, the song itself is just so easy, so accessible. You like it right away. There's this one part that some people might find corny, but there's a person in the background that's doing the whoosh.
I didn't notice.
Yeah, next time you listen to it.
Well,
but it is something that you can see. Oh yeah, you could put this on a playlist that features Christopher Cross and Michael McDonald's Doobie Brothers. Then the beautiful song from the bootleg sessions is Angelina, and again it has the same type of quality with the lyrics, and just like Groom, just so many images. I wrote down a couple that stood out. And again, you see Bob Dylan being very aware of his own flaws. And so one, he describes himself as a monkey. It says, monkey dances to the tune of the concertina, which rhymes with Angelina. So I look at him as saying, you know what, sometimes I'm easily swayed. I'm like a monkey, dancing to a tune. I lose the plot sometimes. And then there's another one, I think he's talking about himself maybe. A black Mercedes rolling through the combat zone. So, he's a guy who is a very privileged individual. And when you're privileged like that, you're kind of numb, you're removed from, when you think of
real
a combat
world problems.
Yeah, you think of a combat zone, you think of poverty, you think of, a city ripped apart, and that he can kind of drive through and remain untouched. And maybe that numbs him a bit. I like to think he's talking about himself.
Yeah.
And then here's one. This is the line that I remember the first time hearing the song, just sitting down, old school, my head between the two speakers, and I thought, what is this line about? Worshipping a god with the body of a woman well endowed and the head of a hyena, Angelina. And I thought, what is that talking about? And thinking about it the last couple of nights, I think, okay, you see this beautiful body and you're attracted to it, and maybe you don't notice until you get a little bit closer. Oh my gosh, it's like a scene from The Shining. It's got the head of a hyena, and when you think of a hyena, that's not an animal that you think is a noble beast,
No.
right? Like a scavenger.
It's a scavenger, right?
Because of that weird laugh it does at night. It's known for like mockery.
And it's scruffy.
Mocking scavenger. So this idea of maybe like a false god that maybe at first seems beautiful, but then when you get closer, you realize it's corrupt.
Well, material things in general. We the material things in life, the things that we want, we desire, sometimes that's the priority over your faith. I buy guitars, and it pleases me for the day I bought the guitar.
I buy vinyl records when I could easily just use my Spotify account.
Yeah.
There's some other tracks. I haven't dived into them deeply, but I like them right away from the bootleg sessions. It's funny. A friend of mine at the time and I both bought the bootleg session at the same time. And he's a big 60s guy. He loves the 60s, even though it's not his time. He's Generation X like we are. So I told him, I said, you know what? I'm really enjoying that final disc. I love these songs from that era. And he looked at me like I was weird. He's like, oh, that's the one part of the set I don't like. But I do. Angelina's on that disc.
Yeah, it's a good song.
You Changed My Life. Do you remember that one? You Changed My Life is great. It's so full of joy. I think maybe Bob didn't put it on the album because it fits more with Saved. But it's a really good song. One that I get a kick out of. I Need a Woman.
That's a good song. Yeah.
And that was recorded during this session.
Dude, he's got like 6 or 7 outtakes that didn't make it on the record. That I don't know. They were good songs. I'm not saying they should have replaced the good songs on that album, but as we discussed, it's a pretty good album from 1 to 10. I would take out a couple of those and replace them with if not enough room is the problem. I would replace Dead Man, and what was that second? Trouble. I'd probably replace those two with Angelina and Caribbean Wind.
I think out of all the tracks, because there's only so much room, those are the 2 tracks I think stand out, and they have a lot in common with Groom and with Every Grain of Sand. Just the great lyrics, so imaginative. But the one thing I was thinking to myself, because like you said, there's 7, 8, maybe even 9 tracks. There's one I haven't even talked about on this one, First Slipper. That was also, it's pretty good, pretty good number. The same year that Bob Dylan came out with this record, The Clash, who are also on Columbia Records, they came out with this album called Sandinista. Dude, it's 3 albums.
Oh.
So I'm thinking to myself, Bob Dylan could have come up with a double album.
Yeah.
Who knows? But when it's all said and done, we have all the tracks, and with technology today, you could easily get on your Spotify or Apple Music and make a playlist where the album starts off with Caribbean Wind, and you put Angelina in there and all the other tracks. But I do think that if a couple of those lesser tracks were removed and you had Caribbean Wind and Angelina on there instead, that critics would have hailed this as the best album since Desire, the best album since Blood on the Tracks.
I agree. I think the critics would have embraced it more with those songs included, and I think it would have been hands down unanimous that people would have said "Shot of Love" is the best of those 3 records. I do like that he's branching into the secular world too, so it's not a total, themed album in that way.
Right.
And then that'll lead us to Infidels, which we'll talk about, in the coming months. So we discussed, I think we started these podcasts, we kind of, the collection of the Bob Dylan podcasts that we're doing is kind of, why Bob Dylan didn't suck in the 80s. And so we're trying to be the contrarians, but a lot of people are kind of agreeing with our sentiments these days. I've noticed more of the revisionist history foretelling of this record is kinder to this record than it was when it came out. So there were what I would call myths. A couple things, a myth that, okay, at this era, his songwriting was declining. We already kind of touched that. No, it wasn't. There's still a lot of poetry in this music, and he's found clever ways to implement this born-again sentiment with the secular world and make it practical, make it digestible. The album lacked great material. Well, I think that comes mainly from leaving off some tracks that a lot of fans have discovered later on and realized they should have been on the record, and it probably would have made a 5 out of 10 songs you like to a 7 out of 10 songs you like,
When you mentioned that, one artist that came to mind was Pete Townsend. So Pete Townsend, if you remember, he had these 2 solo records. And then he also had Face Dances from The Who and It's Hard. And I think Roger Daltrey at the time complained. He says, you're putting the best songs on your solo records. But if he would have combined the songs from a solo record to the Who albums that came out around the same time, you'd have these great albums. So you think of Bob Dylan that way. It's like during this period of the early 80s, when you look at all the songs, man, it was a productive time for him.
It really was. I mean, there's a lot of Dylan to be found and discovered. And you can throw Biograph in that, which came out in 85, which I know it's older music for the most part, but they're outtakes. And it's like, this is all coming from that, in the 80s, you're getting exposed to this great music. Was Dylan still preaching by that third record? I think you hit it really well today. It wasn't a real preachy album. So I don't think he was still preaching. I don't think this was another virtue signaling, you need to be saved.
I think the only thing that maybe bothers me a little bit, if I get my own messages out of the music a lot of times, but the only thing I would say is sometimes I could understand why critics think, he's whining like he's being persecuted and, the victim. I could see a little bit of that, but at the same time, every grain of sand, he's not preaching or, speaking down to us. It's almost like he's speaking with us.
Yeah. No, yep. We talked on Property of Jesus that there was this sentiment that maybe he was also reflecting on the critics, how they treat his music. To be fair, he's gotten a lot of love. He's the father of the future of rock and roll. I mean, he changed the Beatles' trajectory. So he's gotten a lot of love. So when he takes risks, that's their risks.
Right.
And not everybody goes along with it. And I think he gets a little thin-skinned when they don't go along with it. But that's the whole point.
I agree with that take on Property of Jesus. I do think you're right that there's an aspect of that too.
Yeah, like there's a little bit of bitterness there, But yeah, I thought it was sloppy production, but now I got some new ears. I'm listening in a different way. I'm putting the lyrics back in the mix instead of just the melody and the construction of the arrangements. It's a pretty strong record. I think it is melodic. I think whether they remastered it or what, it sounds really good to me today. And oh my gosh, yeah, there was I think this was due to the thin production in the moment. The album is very emotionally strong. Every grain of sand alone is emotional, but so is Heart of Mine. I think in the summertime, I think there's a lot of emotion in this record.
Yeah, you can tell that he's committed to his songs for sure.
Yep. And we said this multiple times. It is a transitional record. It wasn't the end of his creativity. It was a transition. And I think he found his footing. I think this album put the ball on the tee to kick off a really strong 80s output. And that's all I got, Sean.
I agree with you. I think that this is a nice segue into Infidels,
Yep.
which I think is, spoiler alert, a stronger album.
Yeah.
And again, I think that Bob Dylan I think he's getting more comfortable with this new faith. He was so gung-ho about it, like a lot of new converts. He was saying things that weren't necessarily surprising in Saved especially. And now he's being more creative with this new belief. And that's what I love. You see more personality, more creativity, more humor in this record.
And he's found a way to balance that new version of himself with the stuff that everybody liked before he kind of started to, venture into some new spiritual awakenings.
And I've heard a couple of people say, "Oh, he's backing off from the Christian phase, from Christianity." Not really. I mean, when you really dive in and look at the lyrics, there's only one song that doesn't have anything super biblical in it. That's Lenny Bruce is Dead. Everything else does. So I don't think that he's fallen away from his faith.
And he still hasn't.
No, he really hasn't.
If you sit there and say it ended with Shot of Love, and then he woke up and he's finally okay now. No, he was okay with that material, and he's still okay. He still incorporates it. You can get recent albums. You can go. Time Out of Mind has some, the morality or the moral. Sorry, not what am I saying? Mortality.
Yeah,
that's the word I'm looking for. He's really kind of reflecting on his life, his mortality. He was I think he had a heart attack or something around that mid '90s phase. He even played to the Pope in his later years. So it's not like he just all of a sudden was not Christian anymore. I know he kind of went back to his Jewish faith, and he's found some kind of balance and all that. But Infidels, as we'll talk about, has references to some of that awakening, spiritual awakening. So it's still there. He's just a little more subtle with it, and he's a little more mainstream with it.
One thing I wanted to look up before coming over. So this morning I looked up how often does he play "Shot of Love" songs live. And he's on this never-ending tour.
Yeah.
It's probably why he's going to live forever, hopefully. But he performed "Every Grain of Sand" this summer, and it's part.
It made the
playlist.
news.
Oh, did
it
it
made
really?
the news.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. That was actually a headline. Like Dylan's going back deep into some cuts that some stuff that was never even played live is showing up on this tour. If you can decipher it, sometimes he really takes some liberty with melody.
I went to a show about 5 years ago, and I did enjoy it because I was sitting very close. But I could understand why some people are not thrilled with his live performances. But I liked it. He's got an amazing band.
He
and has for
always had A-list musicians backing him.
The other thing I was going to mention is a song that I think gets overlooked that I love. Probably my third favorite song on the record is "Summertime."
I really love
and "Summertime" he performed in 2002, which, me being an old guy, oh yeah, that's not. Oh, actually, that was 24 years ago.
Yeah.
But again, he's played some of these songs, but beyond that, he only played these tunes really in the 80s, where it was a heavy part of his mix, and so now he's resurrected "Every Grain of Sand," which is great. And so, these songs live on, just like, "Saved," when we talked about "Saved," there are some songs that he has performed in the 2000s.
Yeah.
So I say, give it a second listen.
Yeah.
I'm guessing most people that are watching this like "Shot of Love."
Yeah.
But maybe you don't, and hopefully we gave you some, food for thought.
Right. Yeah. At least revisit it and open your mind to accepting it for maybe more than what you thought it was worth when you checked it out years ago. Well, Sean, Infidels is next on the slate. This pretty much concludes.
Yeah, I'm excited about that record because, your first one of your first Dylan records was Empire Burlesque.
Yes.
And my very first legitimate Bob Dylan record, bought the greatest hits first.
Yeah.
And then I got Infidels and loved it. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of good tracks on Infidels. Catchy. It has that 80s production thing going on, which we'll break that down. It's good and bad.
Yeah.
It works.
Loud
all right.
snare drum.
Yeah. and the reverb. Yeah. But I don't want to spoil all that in this one. We talked enough, I think. Thank you all for watching, listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. And hopefully we'll do a lot more of these in the months to come and the years to come.
Sounds great.
All right. Sayonara.
See ya. Bye-bye.